welcome. My name is Jane Carroll, and I'm sitting here in lovely, sunny southeast Wexford. And I'm an acupuncturist. So that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about today. So I know what our kind of general principle here is that we're going to have me talk for maybe 30, 40 minutes, depends on how much talking I can do. And then we'll open it up for questions. However, you know, I know you've probably done a lot of these at this stage. Zoom is kind of new to me. I don't do a lot of this. I do lecture in an acupuncture college in Dublin, but I'm used to being very interactive with people. So please, if I am talking about something and you're kind of going, here she's gone off on a tangent, or I'm not following what she's talking about, please do just unmute and pop in and kind of go, here, whatever, you know, say, or if you have a question or there's something not making sense or whatever, please, there's absolutely no problem whatsoever with that. Okay, so what kind of I'm going to look at over the course of hopefully the next 30 or 40 minutes is, first of all, tell you a little bit about myself, tell you a little bit about acupuncture and Chinese medicine and where it comes from and what it's all about. I won't bore you too much with that. What I'm really going to look at then is looking at ME kind of from a Chinese medicine perspective. I presume for most people, when you have any sort of chronic condition or anything like that, that, you know, there's so many different theories and everybody has different opinions and all that. So I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about kind of where I look at it from and stuff. When I was asked to do this, I kind of was like, does anybody really want to listen to me talking about for a half an hour or 40 minutes about what I do without and then maybe have nothing to show at the end of it. So what I do hope to do is to be able to explain a little bit about the condition from my perspective, if you were here in clinic with me or whatever, and what I would be looking at, but also then to actually show you some acupuncture points. Don't worry, I don't expect you to go home and take out the knitting needle and start sticking it in yourself. But to actually show you some points that may be relevant to you, explain what they're for, and that you can actually do acupressure at home on yourself. So I'm kind of hoping that at the end of this little talk, that you have a little bit of skill to be able to do something that might be helpful for you on a daily basis. And then the last little bit is going to be about talking a little bit about foods and stuff like that. And that might be a little bit different than some of the stuff that you kind of come across here in the Western world. So again, it is just like, I suppose, the principles that I work from. So that's kind of going to be the format. And then, as Declan said, we'll open up and if people have questions and stuff like that. But please do feel that you can ask questions as we go along. I do have a whiteboard set up behind me because some of the stuff I'm going to explain, I probably explain it better by drawing. It is a little dependent on the sunlight, unfortunately. The room that I'm in, it's kind of, it's kind of hard to regulate it. So I'm hoping it's going to be visible to be able to see, but we'll play with it if not, okay? I'm also not somebody who reads loads of scripts, so you're not going to listen to me. So this is a little bit kind of, I won't say off the cuff, but I do have some notes here just to kind of give me a guide of where I want to go, because otherwise I can go off on mad tangents and 20 minutes can be gone and I've just talked about something completely right. All right. So first of all, anyway, who I am and what I do and whatever, I'm going to keep very, very brief for how I came to be about here. My background is originally in complementary health, which would have been massage, aromatherapy, reflexology, nutrition. And then I went on and I studied sports injuries. And I suppose I kind of felt that I had a skill to a point with all of that, but there was a lot of stuff that I kind of felt I was missing. And then I went back and I studied Chinese medicine. And I kind of liked how they look at things differently than what we do here in the Western world. However, I'm not somebody that's anti-Western medicine at all. I think sometimes when people meet alternative therapists, they think that we're very anti our doctors and stuff like that. I live in a world where I think we all should try to work together and that things should just complement each other. And that's very much what I'm about. So you won't hear me ever criticizing what the doctor has said or anything like that. I think we all have skills, and it's all about trying to find what works for us as individuals. How I ended up with this little gig today on my lunch break is that I'm assuming most of you probably have come across Tracy O'Donoghue, because I think she does a good bit of work with you. Tracy and I used to work together years ago, and we're good buddies, and we have some really interesting chats and stuff about what we do. So I'm hoping I can kind of just share some of my stuff with you. So anyway, that's kind of enough about me. On the off chance there is anybody in Wexford or in this area that ever needs an acupuncturist, I think the lads will probably post up my details and stuff like that, but that's not what today is about. First of all, like, what is, with the assumption that maybe not anybody has ever been, or there's some people that have never been here for acupuncture or are familiar with any sort of Chinese medicine, I'm kind of going to give you a little bit of an idea of what it's about. And then more in relation to your own condition. When I said to you that my background was all that other stuff first, and then I went to Chinese medicine, what fascinated me about Chinese medicine is that everybody is an individual. So there's no such thing as, if somebody walks into me and says, oh, I've got ME, I don't have like a set protocol, or there's no set, everybody is treated individually. Okay. And to me, that's what kind of makes it quite special, is that you don't just treat an illness, you treat a person. And that's where Chinese medicine comes from, is that you have all these different symptoms, and you probably all know that as a group, is that you all might have one particular technical diagnosis, but how that affects you can be very varied. And that works quite well for us in our Chinese world. So if somebody says to me, well, okay, well, what is ME? It's very, very hard, therefore, to say, oh, this is what it is in Chinese medicine. There is no real absolute. There's no kind of standard set thing, but there are things that are very much in common. Okay, so to kind of backtrack that a little bit, I suppose I'm going to talk about a few little things. First thing is, we look at the body differently. We look at the body being a source of qi. Okay, you have to remember this type of medicine goes back like thousands of years. So they didn't have scanners to be able to even identify that we have different organs, or where they are, or what they do. And that's where the premise of Chinese medicine comes from, is that they use this word qi. And again, even qi is really hard to translate. Some people will say energy. It's probably not the best description. Qi is basically anything that can have an energy source, or that can live. So qi can be blood, qi can be muscles, qi can be stress, it can be an emotion. Okay, so it doesn't have to be something that's tangible. And Chinese medicine looks at qi moves through our body and it flows freely. And when everything flows freely, then our health is really good. If we have a blockage of qi in an area, then that creates a symptom. That symptom can be pain, it can be numerous other things. If we have too little qi, that can create problems. If we have too much qi in areas, that can be problems. So there's no such thing of then saying, oh, well, somebody with ME will definitely have this or definitely have that. It all will be very much an individual. Okay. Then just to confuse that a little bit, and this is kind of like, this is day one of acupuncture college in a way, is what you're kind of getting a little bit. But I think a lot of people are probably familiar with the Yin Yang symbol, the little squiggly thing with the black and white. What that really means is it's about balance. It's about the black and the white means the yin and the yang, and that we need everything to be in balance and to be synchronized together. Yin is, how do I explain? Yin is probably like from an emotional point of view, yin is like peacefulness, calmness, tranquility. When I say to my clients, it's really important that we nourish our yin, I mean that it's important to take time out, to have time where we stop and where we step out of the world that we live in. Yang is the other side of that. Generally, we live in a very yang world. Yang is activity, it's vibrance, it's stimulation. It's so if we look at the average everyday person, they get up in the morning, but they start with that stimulation of an alarm clock or the phone, and then they're like on Facebook, and then it's like, oh God, I have to get out of bed, and then they're rushing around, and you know, it's like the kids or the radio or the television, and then it's into the car, and then it's like, oh, the traffic, and it's like, so all of those things are regarded as being yang. It's all just constant stimulation. And remember I mentioned the idea that this is all about balance. So we need some yang. Like, we can't live in a completely yin world where we wake up in the morning when we feel like it and we think, oh, we lay in bed and yeah, I don't really need to do it. That's not good for us either. So it's about trying to create that balance between the yin and yang. And that's where, no matter what condition you have, no matter where you're at in your life, that's the fundamental part of Chinese medicine, is that balance. Okay, so you'll hear me using that word balance and balance and balance. And that's what it means, is that, you know, it's the, you know, if we live in that yang world and we decide, oh, right, we're going to go for a walk, okay, because, you know, Jane has said, walking is good for your yin. Okay, well, walking is only good for your yin if you can go for a nice walk and take nice deep breaths and stop and smell the flower, or, you know, where if the walk becomes, oh God, yeah, I need to put on the watch now and I want to be walking like 9-minute kilometers, and you're jumping down the road like this, then that walk has become yang, because it's that thing again, okay? So balance, everything has to be balanced, okay? So that's the general, you know, very simple principles of Chinese medicine and how we look at our lives. And if you get nothing else out today but just that thinking about that, and that applies to everybody, it's about trying to find your balance. Okay, so for some people that are naturally very yang type, they will get away with having more of that and having more energy, but they still do need to find the other side. Well, likewise, if you're the person, I'm assuming, we'll talk a little bit more about this later on, but I'm assuming when you have ME, it's very much like trying to not overdo it, that it takes an awful lot to kind of, it doesn't take an awful lot to push you over that. So, but it's still about trying to find that you don't just do nothing kind of thing. And I'm going to actually move on to kind of a little bit of a diagram to try to explain how it all works. Okay. So, sorry, now I'm going to stand up. I'm hoping everybody can still A, hear me, and B, see me. Okay. So how we kind of draw this, or how I explain this, and I do this in clinic with my clients, is I look at that whole yin and yang balance. Okay. So if we are healthy, okay, I think that should be, okay. If we're healthy, this is kind of like a bar chart. Don't worry, we're not going into maths and around like that. It's not going to get complicated, okay? This, say, is our yin, and this is our yang. Okay? Is that all right? Is that readable? Yeah, okay. So the idea is that they should be equal. So this is my whole thing about like balance, and everything is all nice. So this is the good, healthy person that we are in theory, okay? How many of us fit into this category? Probably none of us, okay? But that's our ultimate aim, is that we have that really nice and even, okay? So if we, for all the world, live in a world whereby we're that person, the wake up in the morning, the alarm clock, the go, the kind of never. What happens is, maybe our yin sits here lovely, but our yang becomes up here, okay? And this creates illness, okay? Now, I could spend an hour talking alone about what that does, so I'm not going to go and bog you all down in that one. And probably because it's maybe not awfully relevant to the group of people that I have here today, okay? So what does happen with this, okay? So when I mentioned this yang is our activity, it's our vibrance, it's our energy, it's all of that, okay? there may be some people in this group here today that once had this lifestyle, okay? If we have too much yang, yang is also hot, and yin is cold, okay? But if we have had a lifestyle of being very, very yang, the yang burns away at our yin, okay? So what can end up happening is not only have we too much yang here, but we actually end up losing some of our yin, okay? So now all of a sudden our yin level is quite low, okay? And I will explain the implications of this in a few minutes, okay? But yang is like fire, it's hot, it's like, it's, you know, even that, like we use phrases here of like somebody being hot-headed. The hot-headed person isn't like, oh yeah, I'm so chill. The hot-headed person is like wound up as well, aren't they? So that's that real excess yang stuff going on, okay? But we can only be that for so long. The analogy that I've come across that best describes that is if you look at a fire. A fire is burning, it's blazing, it's full of like, full of vigor, okay? But it needs fuel, and it needs that fuel. And somewhere along the line, every fire will burn out. Think of like the big forest fires. Eventually, when it runs out of trees, it will stop burning. So if you're the person, and this may be, and this is what I'm meaning about ME, I can't turn around and say everybody that comes in that has your condition has certain pathologies, but this can be one type of person, the person who has had that very active, overactive lifestyle and has burnt out, for want of a better description. And what has happened is the yang is burnt away at the yin, but eventually what happens is this yang actually burns out as well. So now all of a sudden, instead of your qi being nice and up there, everything has become depleted. And we would call this like a deficiency pattern. Okay? Now, so that's one reason why something like ME can occur, and it can cause loads of other things. It doesn't. It's very much open to a lot of other conditions as well. So the other part of that is you can actually just be born, whether it's congenital or whatever. You can actually just have somebody where they're not born with this level of yin and yang, and instead the same thing. They can just have low levels of both. Okay. So I would say nearly anybody I've ever treated in clinic with ME, and again, I'm very much saying we don't have an absolute here. We can't say everybody, but everybody I have treated will either fall into this category here, whereby they had quite an active lifestyle. They will fall into the category whereby if they look back on their childhood, they were the kids that were maybe less active, less wanting to do things, maybe sickly as a child, maybe had some deficiency from birth. Or the other one that comes into that is whereby maybe not yang as in excess in terms of activity, but any sort of stress, fear, shock, trauma, anything like that can put the body into this as well. Okay? But at the end of the day, the chances are, if any of you were here in my clinic, this is where I would be imagining that this is where we have a problem and where we have an imbalance. Okay? And what we would regard that as been somebody who's actually deficient. Okay? The patterns of where that deficiency goes to is very varied. And I'm not going to go into that today because it's just going to go off on a multitude of tangents. What I am going to then explain is, I suppose, the varied symptoms. So from my experience, and you can correct me later on if you want, my understanding of this very much is that your symptoms can vary so much. I've seen people here in clinic that have complained of, obviously the tiredness is the biggie, but we can have people with sleep problems, poor concentration, difficulty memorizing, difficulty with focus, to flu-like symptoms, palpitations, dizziness, and then things like headaches, migraine, shoulder tension, body ache and pain. There's so many different things. Okay, so why does that happen? And I'm going to explain why these happen, and then so that I'm going to then be able to explain to you what the points are that I'm going to show you, so that you can sit at home and go, oh yeah, this is kind of relevant to me, or this one isn't. So bear with me. Okay, so why does this happen? So all of these symptoms, if we could keep these level like this, okay, what we would probably find is that, yeah, you mightn't be bursting with energy and be feeling 100% like this person, okay? But what you would find is that your symptoms mightn't be as severe. But the problem when we're starting on a lower level of chi is that it doesn't take an awful lot to throw the body out of balance. So if you have this person here, where the perfect normal who fits that, but anyway, person, and say something happens that's a little bit stressful or that has some effect, and their yin gets a little bit depleted, okay, and that's not going to affect them massively because they have plenty of yin in reserve. But if this happens to be you and we deplete a little bit of your yin, that will create a much more serious or a much more evident symptom because you don't have as much in reserve. Okay? So that is the reason why. So yin, so say for instance, this particular one, so then, sorry again, this is the yin here. This is the yang. So if your yin becomes deficient, so prime example is right now, is this whole COVID thing. If we think of yin being about peacefulness and calmness and being relaxed, I would say probably half the people who have come to my clinic in the last 4 weeks since I've opened back up have had some aspect of their yin being deficient, because we're in a time of a lot of worry and concern, and that has created, I don't know whether I like to use the word anxiety because I think that's a very clinical word, but like worry, concerned, anxiousness, all of those little things where we start to overthink things, okay? We've had this huge upheaval to our lives. No matter what, everybody's life has changed right now, in my opinion anyway. And that depletes our yin. But the more we deplete our yin, the more we end up with symptoms like not being able to sleep, affecting our concentration, palpitations. I'd be very surprised if somebody sitting here hasn't turned around and said, yeah, I've had a moment where I've been lying in bed at night, or I've been sitting and I can hear my heart racing. I had 3 clients last week here in my clinic who two had been in hospital and 1 wasn't, with suspected heart attacks. They never had a heart attack. They had no heart problems. It was pure panic. It was pure stress. That in Chinese medicine will be regarded as being yin deficient. But for yourselves as a group, what's so important is to try to maintain this balance, because you don't have the reserve that maybe somebody else may have, okay? And likewise, if, say we go the other way, so say your yin is fine, but say you're the personality, that's a whole other story as well. Personality types vary things a lot in Chinese medicine. We take very much the person that you are. You've already met me. You probably can guess by the fact that I stand here and I kind of bounce around a bit. I'm quite a yang type person. You know, that's just my personality. I'm kind of a little bit kind of like, you know, bunny rabbit kind of like thing. Okay, so I have to work really hard on my yin, because my tendency is to go and go and go and go and be like, you know, I'm the person that goes for the run rather than stopping kind of thing. So we have to take that personality on. But like, say for instance, and I use myself as that example then. So if I don't look after myself, what can happen is my yang can rise up. Okay. Now, again, if I'm up here and my yang rises just a little bit, that's fine. That's okay. I'm all right with that. But if you're that type of person that maybe, like, maybe not physically, but that hot-headed, the fly off the handle, the redhead, if you're that type of personality and that's within you to have that kind of tendency to be, okay, when there's maybe a stress, instead of the worry getting in on you, maybe you become quite short-tempered and that other, the chances are this type of person will be more inclined to get the headaches, the migraines, hot-headed. Sometimes anybody that maybe that suffers from migraine will literally say, oh yeah, my head is hot. Or I asked that question in clinic and they're like, yeah, why is my head hot? That phrase of somebody being hot-headed in Chinese medicine means that their yang is in excess. Okay, sorry, I'm covering like a million different things all in one kind of little talk here. But so what am I trying to say really is that for everybody, this is important. Our ultimate aim is to have this. Okay, if you're, and again, I'm being slightly presumptuous, but my opinion from being in clinic here is that most people with ME have something on this kind of level where everything is deficient. So therefore, you as a person has to be a lot more mindful of creating that balance. And that balance has to be everything from your food to your activity, but also not forgetting the balance of the mind and trying to find ways to relax your mind, to be calm, to maybe process your thinking in a logical way. People that are yin deficient are inclined to be overthinkers. So if your yin is a little bit low, it is very, very easy to get into a pattern of overthinking is probably the best description, but if maybe some of you can identify with somebody making a comment and the comment being meant with no ulterior motive, but sitting down that night and being like, I wonder what they meant by that, and did they think this, and oh God, I wonder about this, and all of a sudden the mind has gone into 40 million tangents that was not relevant at all. But that's a real classical sign of that yin being deficient. It's very common, I don't know my age demographic at all, it's a very common thing for menopausal women to be yin deficient, okay? And it's something that I would see an awful lot of, that women will come in and say, yeah, like I'm in mind, I can't rest, I can't sleep, I'm like all of these things. And it's exactly that, you know, the husband has made some flippant comment about something completely like, kind of like, you know, passing you by in the kitchen going, oh, look at that big arse on you, or something like that. And all of a sudden you're lying in the bed going, oh Jesus, like, does my arse look big? I'm not putting on weight. And all of a sudden something very, very simple has become something really big in your head. Okay, so that's as lighthearted of a way of putting it across as I can. But that overthinking, take that and put coronavirus into our everyday life right now, and you see a comment on the television whereby, you know, somebody mentions that, you know, somebody at 30 years of age with an underlying condition has had coronavirus and maybe passed away or whatever. We're being bombarded by negativity. That's what we're living in at the moment. You know, unfortunately, we're not hearing the good news stories. We're not hearing about the thousands of people every day that get COVID-19 and come out the other side of it perfectly okay. We are being bombarded by that negative, that worry, that concern, and that all has effect on our yin. It has this massive effect on our yin for all of us. Okay, so what do we do about it? Okay, how am I doing on time? Okay, that's all right. Can I still talk for another few minutes? Is everybody still awake? Okay. So what can we do about that? Okay, back to the same thing. You have to be so mindful of keeping this as balanced as you possibly can. Okay, so sorry, I'm going to my next little scrap of paper. Okay, so I am going to show you some acupuncture points, that will help with that. And I'll talk very briefly about food first, okay? Because again, I'm going to run out of time, as I always do when I go talk. But anyway, but Chinese medicine doesn't put the same. So anyway, how do we create this balance? One thing is whether it's yoga, whether it's meditation, any of those nice kind of things that help us to just maybe step out of the world that we're in for moments. If we do something like meditation, the one thing I always say to people is like, don't be like, I have to do 15 minutes of this. Because now all of a sudden the whole concept of what it's about has become something that has become yang. It's become like now an activity that's putting stress on me. Sometimes, you know what, it's as simple as stepping out in the garden for a minute and just being like, and just been in that moment for that 20 seconds or whatever it is, and accepting that, okay, we have to get back to the real world now, maybe. Okay. Anyway, I digressed a little bit on that. Where I was going with was about like our mind being calm, our mind being peaceful, our mind being as relaxed as we can try to make it, and finding ways to do that. I personally, for most of COVID, I took Facebook off my phone. I took my work email off my phone. I took news app off my phone, and I basically didn't really watch any news or anything. I live with somebody who's obsessed by it, so I got the general gist of it off him, and it was plenty. It was enough. So that was my way. Now, I'm not saying that's for everybody, but I do think this whole Facebook thing, it's so easy to be sitting there and just be constantly bombarded with everybody else. That's not always good. Anyway, where the other things that we then can look at is we can look at our food. And Chinese medicine doesn't put the same emphasis on like calories and that type of food as what Western medicine does. We look very much at the idea of how good is your body at absorbing and getting the most out of your food. And that's a whole new way of thinking. Okay. Like, if this person eats 1,000 calories, I'm using calories even though I don't really understand calories because it's a Western language that I don't really know an awful lot about, but I'm using it as an example. If this person eats 1,000 calories, they will get a lot more energy out of their 1,000 calories than what this person will. I'm hoping that kind of makes sense, because our chi and everything about this person is more depleted and is more deficient than what this person. Okay, so although it is important to eat good quality food, part of that importance is about trying to get our bodies into the best position it can be, so that when we give it food, that it gets the most nourishment out of it. Okay, so here in Ireland, we live in a cold, damp country. That would be I suppose a diagnosis of our country from a Chinese point of view. That our country is damp, our air is damp. Even in the summertime, it's damp. I did a stint in Vietnam about 4 years ago in a hospital over there, and they used to use us as an example, and they'd point and go, and the fat damp people was what they used to call us all. Luckily, we weren't easily offended. But that's our culture, that's our environment, okay, is that we live. But our diet also doesn't always suit what we eat. This is my constant lecturing clinic. Like, I'd say nearly every day somebody hears my little rant about this, is that who in their right mind thought that in Ireland we should eat salads in December? It makes no sense. Okay, so we put our spleen and our stomach is the kind of terminology that we use all into one category in Chinese medicine. And it doesn't like the damp, and it doesn't really like the cold. And if you put damp or cold foods into your body, raw foods into your body has to work at bringing that food up to temperature before it can do anything with it. If you're this person and you don't have that abundance of energy, why would you put food in your body that your body's going to have to use up energy just to break down the food? it is completely, like, what's the word, counterproductive. Okay, this is my little rant. I do apologize now, but it just doesn't make sense. So if we think back of, I would say, my grandparents, okay, you didn't get lettuce in Ireland in December, or tomatoes, or cucumbers, or radishes, or any of those other things that we think about. They weren't here. Why? Because we can't grow them. They don't grow in our country. Why? Because it's cold. It's not designed for our climate. What did our parents and our grandparents eat in winter? They ate things like stews and soups and things that were all like, lovely and nourishing. We all do it. We all kind of go, oh, I love a hot cup of tea. And then we eat freaking salad to go with it. Okay? So that's my one thing to ask you to consider, is that you look at the idea of eating foods or drinking things that will provide nourishment to your body, and that your body doesn't have to actually do anything to try to get the energy out of it. Okay, so my whole thing is drinks should be warm. There's no reason in the world why a drink should be come out of a fridge. Makes no sense. Even in the summertime, at least room temperature. But as a general rule, ice in Chinese medicine doesn't exist. I was at a conference one day in Holland, and somebody asked about ice. It was to do with an injury, but they were asking about ice, and your man allowed that ice only had one function, that was for dead people. That was it. So it definitely, in our country, we do not need to have ice in drinks. We do not need to have our drinks out of the fridge. Our food should be warm. If, say for instance, like at the moment, where I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm in Wexford and the sun is shining. But say like a day like today, where it is probably like 20 degrees here, you kind of like, oh yeah, you're not going to sit down and eat hot stew. But if you're going to have something that's salad and that's cold and that's raw, then that maybe you have like something like a piece of like poached salmon or grilled chicken or something with it that actually adds a little bit of heat, so that when you eat all your food together, it's already bringing up the heat into the whole overall food. Okay, but that would be no cold, no raw. Definitely in the middle of winter. Anybody who thinks the idea of, and this is where myself and Tracy and other people will have loads of arguments, but the idea of like the big hype of them over the last 5 years about juicing, like unless you have a real heat pathology type of symptoms, which that's a whole other day's talk, but anyway, but there is no real benefit for having juices like that. It's way too much on the body to try. If you're this person and you put that level of cold and raw food into your body, it is just putting it under so much pressure. Okay. Now, obviously, if you're in clinic, I'd be looking at everybody as an individual, and there may be somebody sitting here that may have other patterns that may suit. But as a general rule, if you're not the person that's the really hot, like highly flushed, hot-headed, constantly roasting, going around like in the middle of winter with your t-shirt on, if you're not that person, then why would you be putting loads of raw and cold foods into your body? Okay. Anyway, that's that bit here. I really am going to run out of time, aren't I? But I really do want to, is it okay if I show some acupuncture points? Is that okay? Okay. So why am I then showing you some acupuncture points? So we have, I'm going to roughly show you where these are. But I'm going to write up, and you can actually look these up online and maybe get a better description if you're kind of, if I'm going to like stick up my leg and stuff and show you here. Okay. So, what I had written. Okay. So, as I said, obviously we're not going to you're not going to go home and stick needles in yourself. I do not recommend that. It's not very sterile. Okay. But what you can do is use acupuncture points to stimulate, and just do it with your thumb. So really what you're going to do is I'm going to show you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 6 points. And what you're going to do is you're going to apply pressure. So it can be with your thumb, it can be with like the end of a pen, something like that. And you're just going to apply pressure and massage the area, okay? And you can do that as often as you want to stimulate the point. To get the benefit out of any sort of thing like that, it's lovely if you can do these points, sit down, some nice relaxing music, a nice cozy warm room, and that you sit there. even better if you have somebody that you can teach the points to and that they'll do it for you. That's the ultimate aim, all right? So what am I going to show you? I'm going to show you first 3 points. And this is about the spleen. So this is about the spleen and the stomach. So it's about nourishing what we call, sounds very religious and it's not remotely, but it's called the root of post-heaven chi, which is basically about nourishing your food. So this is back to this principle of these 3 points help your body to get the most out of their food. Okay, so if you want to look them up, I've given you just the English words. So we have stomach, which is ST36. Okay, we're going to have spleen, which is SP, and this is how, if you even just put these into Google, you'll get results. You have spleen 6, and you have REN, REN 12, just in case anybody can't see the board, I'm not sure. Okay, so these 3 points are to give the body energy, but primarily to give the body the capacity to use its food better. Okay, so I'm going to show you, my leg is going to be the next part of this to try to figure out how to get to these points. Okay, so feel free if you want to have a little poke while you're there, or you can do it at home. But anyway, so it's very classy I am now, by the way, right? So I'm going to roll up the leg of my trousers, right? All points can be used on the left or the right. There's no difference. But generally, again, we're back to balance. So if you do one of these points on one leg, then it's a good idea to do the other point on the opposite side, because again, we're treating our body by balance. Okay. So the first point, which is stomach 36, and as I said, if you Google these, you might find a little video or something like that. But this is the general principle. So you're going to look at the middle of your knee, and you're going to come down along, and you're going to find a little bone or a little lump on your knee down here. It's called your tibial tuberosity, if you really want to know. Okay, but it's down along past my knee, and it's at the top of your shin bone kind of thing is where it is. Okay, and there's a little bump on the bone there. Okay, sorry, I lift up my leg another bit. Okay. So what you're then going to do is you're going to move your hand outward, so out to the outside. It's called the lateral side of your body, but out to the outside of your leg. So I'm not going to tell you left or right, because first of all, I'm not good at left and right, but secondly, depends on what leg you have up. So you're going to the outside, and you're going to have a little feel around. So I like using these 2 fingers. Thumbs, not so much, but doesn't matter. But these 2 fingers, and you're going to have a little feel. So you're going to come down, find the bump, and you're going to have a little feel around there. And for some people, you might even find a spot that's a little bit tender or a little bit sore. Now, because we're not putting in an acupuncture needle and you're going to use something that's quite big, it doesn't make any difference if you're not 100% on the point. You're in that general area. And what you're going to do is you're going to just take a pen, and you're going to just sit there and apply a little bit of pressure, you know, and you just sit there and you just give it a little bit of a rub in a little circular motion. Okay. And that's it. So you can do like 10 seconds, 20 seconds. You can do 10 seconds and go over to the other one and give it a little rub. There is no real hard and fast rule on that. Okay. That point is stomach 36. In translating Chinese medicine, the translation of the Chinese word is 3 mile leg. It's meant to be where if you actually can stimulate that with an acupuncture point, that you can actually run 3 miles after. Not quite believing that now personally, but anyway. So that's the first one. Okay. The second one then is your spleen 6 point. Okay. And you're going to go in on, now I'm going to have to move my thing a little bit. 1 second. No, I'm not sure because the light might cause a slight problem now. But anyway. So, yeah, okay. I didn't think about how non-elegant this was going to look, by the way. But anyway, we get there, right? So the next one is, not only that, but I have to stand on one leg. Right, you're going to find the inside of your ankle, this what's called your medial malleolus, which is basically like the bony bit of your ankle, right? And you're going to take your fingers. So everything in Chinese medicine has got to do with your own body measurement anyway. So you're going to put your little finger on that bony bit, and you're going to put your 4 fingers up along your leg. Okay? And then you're going to put your pen somewhere here for the moment. Everybody still able to see that while I try to balance on one leg? Okay. So Now what you're going to do is you're going to come feel for the bone along here, and you're going to come in on the back of the bone. Okay? For very often for people, that point can be quite tender. But that's where your spleen 6 is. Okay? So we'll have four fingers from your ankle bone up, and then you're coming at the back of that bone. Okay? As I said, you can Google these, you will find little videos that's probably far more elegant than what I'm showing, and maybe you might actually give, well, and the same idea. This is a lovely yin nourishing point as well. So not only do these 3 points together work really well, but this actually is a really good point to nourish yin. This is a yang point. So again, we're looking at them being balanced. Okay? And the third point I'm going to do, and I'm not going to show you my belly because it's not pretty, is I'm going to show you Ren 12. Okay? So you're going to find your belly button. And again, the same idea. But this time you're going to put your whole hand above your belly button. So that's my belly button here. I'm going to put my whole hand on top of it. And in a straight line, the acupuncture point is there. So it's your hand. So it will obviously vary a little bit depending on the size of your hand and the size of your body. So if that's my belly button there, my hand goes on top. It's a straight line up along, and the point is there. And again, the same thing. And you can do it over your clothes. It doesn't matter. You can just sit there and stimulate your Ren 12 point. So what I'm doing with that is I'm pushing in the pen or the marker, and I'm just doing a little circular movement. But I'm not doing this. I'm literally pushing in on the point and then just moving around. Okay?